All right, man. Take 3. Daniel, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, man.
So
It's nice to be out of the heat.
yeah, we were just testing you to see if you could take the heat, really.
Dude, nobody can take that.
No, the computer can take it. So like we were talking before, how don't we just go over again, how you got into martial arts, and then we can get into what we haven't covered.
Sure. So grew up boxing with my pops.
Yeah.
And then did a lot of like high school sports, mostly basketball. Had a quadricep injury my senior year, and then went to college. Kind of said whatever to sports. Wasn't doing anything active. Was playing in a band, and a buddy of mine from high school was like, "Hey, dude, I know you're not working out or doing anything. Come with me. Try this jiu-jitsu stuff I'm doing. You're gonna really
Where did
enjoy
you try your jiu-jitsu? Yeah.
So back then, it was at the Miami Beach Police Athletic League.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
The instructor would rent timeout from the PAL 3 times a week, and that's where we would train.
Interesting.
There were barely any jiu-jitsu academies around.
Yeah,
There were
man,
like
I
2 or
remember them.
3. I think Cyborg was down the road a little bit, down like Alton. He was at like a Crunch gym at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Way back in the day.
Wasn't he with like Pablo Pavlovich back in the day?
Yeah, back in the day,
Yeah.
those guys were all, and then shortly after that, they had the whole Avengers thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. So you started there?
Yeah, so I started there, loved it right off the bat, and then I was like, okay, this is gonna be my hobby. This is gonna be my thing. Started off just as like a workout, and then from there, I got into interested in MMA. So that was my first like, okay, I'm gonna take this a little more seriously as a sport. I want to do mixed martial arts. I did that. There was no amateur at the time, so I fought a couple times as a pro. Won all 3 of my fights, but I didn't dig the vibe at the time.
Yeah.
Spent a little time just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna compete jiu-jitsu then. That's what I prefer. And right around the time I was a purple belt is when I got really passionate about teaching the art.
Right.
Because my viewpoint kind of changed when my father got sick with cancer. He had a long 2-year battle with pancreatic cancer and passed away.
Right.
And during that time, I started teaching privates out of my backyard.
Yeah.
And just kind of watching what my dad went through, I kind of promised myself, I want to do something with my life that makes me happy.
Yeah.
And I want to pursue my interests more than I want to pursue like a paycheck.
Right.
So that kind of like, that's around the time when jiu-jitsu started going from something I'm interested in an athletic sense, and as opposed to something I'm interested in really getting deep into and learning and sharing with people, and kind of like a way to like pass the art, but at the same time create a space for people to come together.
Right.
So that started me on the path to teaching. When I finished my time at Miami-Dade and transferred over to FIU, they had a FIU mixed martial arts club.
Yeah.
At the GC, and I went over there to check those guys out, thinking, I'm going to start a BJJ club or something. But when I found them, I was like, let me go check out their club.
Yeah.
And after the first night, I was like the most experienced guy in the room. And they were like, do you want to teach it?
So you want to teach?
Yeah. So I was like, done. I'm in. I don't have to make the club. I don't have to do anything. I'll just take over. So I took over, and then a couple of those guys that started with me then as a purple belt are actually 2 of my black belts now.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
Which is cool. Those guys have been with me since I was a purple belt,
Yeah.
That's around the time that I also like I had a bit of a falling out with my first instructor. It was kind of the deal, like there wasn't a lot of jiu-jitsu back in the day.
Yeah.
And a lot of the jiu-jitsu that was available is very old school.
Okay.
Right. And there's a certain mentality that comes with that.
Right.
And I just think as human beings, we didn't vibe together.
Right.
And then he also had an opportunity where he moved his family up to like Vero Beach or something like that.
Okay.
And it was a better fit for him. So he was on his way, and I would need an instructor. And I was looking around and was in the area, and I was like, man, I want to do something different.
Right.
Competing and traveling around and stuff. I'd made friends in the jiu-jitsu community. And one of those friends was at the time he was doing photography, and he had done a couple of like big spreads with like jiu-jitsu athletes. Like he did a really famous photo shoot with Hickson, stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
So I reached out to him and I told him, hey man, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm just looking around trying to find someone. And like my two favorite grapplers on the planet at the time were Marcelo Garcia, who's
Right.
killing it,
Yeah.
right? And then like the guy I would follow who was like my personal favorite was Damian Maia.
Yeah.
Turns out my photographer buddy, childhood friends with Damian.
Childhood friends.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And Damian had like been in touch with him and like, hey man, I'm kind of like feeling out maybe spreading my like jiu-jitsu association to the US, because
Yeah.
in Brazil he has a big academy.
Right.
He teaches a lot and he has black belts and they have academies, but he never really had anything in the States.
Right.
And he was just kind of feeling out whether he wanted to like branch out into the States. And my friend Flavio said, hey, I got a guy who's interested. So I get a phone call from my buddy and he's like, hey, Damian's going to be in New York training at Marcelo Garcia's gym and he wants to see if you want to go train.
And the stars aligned.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, so I just hop on a plane, go to New York and spend a week training with my two favorite grapplers on the planet.
How was that?
Insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely insane, you know. This is like Marcelo Garcia at the height
Right.
of Marcelo Garcia.
The human backpack, the X-Guard guy.
Yeah. Damian coming into like freshly arrived in the UFC,
Right.
ADCC titles, world titles, like crazy. And then back then is when Marcelo at his gym had the famous squad of brown belts.
Okay.
Mateus Diniz,
Okay.
Dylan Dennis, Jonathan Satava, Gianni Grippo.
Yeah.
So
which is doing great, by the way.
So all those dudes are in the room, right? And I'm just like, I'm in heaven,
Right.
right? And then, dude, it was like me and Damian hit it off from like the get, and we've been friends ever since. And he asked me at the end of that week, is like, hey man, like, do you want to come in under me and start our association? There was only one other guy, Mark Turner, who's a friend of mine who runs a school up in Chicago.
Oh, cool.
He'd been with Damian for maybe about a year or so before I did.
Okay.
And that's how we started.
Dude,
And
that's such a crazy story, man.
yeah, and dude, and then I've been with Damian for the majority of his UFC career.
Yeah.
So it's crazy because he lives in Brazil, but a lot of his training, even off time, like off training camps, he does in the US. Marcelo's, or he's in the States doing seminars or whatever. So I followed him all over the country.
Wow. So you gained a lot of not only knowledge, but experiences as well.
Yeah. And helping him. And like, dude, like meeting crazy, like I've made crazy friendships because I'm tagging along, following Damian in all these places. You know?
Yeah.
So that was a really cool experience. And yeah, it's just nuts. Like I went from probably the dude's biggest YouTube fan to meeting him, becoming friends with him, to becoming his first American black belt. And
that's
now
insane.
And I've been with him now for, I want to say 12, 13 years.
That's awesome, dude. And you said something in particular, like when you decided to make a shift into pursuing your passion, I noticed that you made emphasis on learning the art.
Yeah.
So is that what really drives you? Is that passion to learn, or is it that passion to teach it?
I think it's the passion to learn it. I think I was blessed that like I have a talent for teaching. People always told me, you're good at explaining things. The way you lay things out, the way you think is weird, but interesting. And I do have like an obsessive compulsive thing where it's like when I get into something, I will pick it apart to the bones.
Okay.
And like I'm very big on like deep dives, but then also like, how do I do this better? How I do this more efficiently? And that's for like any little hobby I pick up.
Right.
When jiu-jitsu became like my life passion, yeah, I mean, I've spent years and years and years trying to reinvent the wheel and learning. And I do have a legitimate passion for learning. And I've gained an appreciation for the power of teaching and sharing jiu-jitsu with people over time.
Yeah. So you say like, is that passion for learning across board? Anything you just get when you get interested in something, you're really into learning it?
Yeah, I get ridiculous.
Yeah.
I get really ridiculous. Like, dude, like
deep rabbit hole 3 a.m, still reviewing.
Dude, anything that becomes a hobby, it's game over. Like I picked up my first old man hobby.
Okay.
When I hurt my back, I was like, I like watches. I'm gonna check out watches.
Oh, that's a deep one.
I started watchmaking. I bought watchmaking tools. I have like, dude, like I have a whole like my wife will come into the living room and I will have like this crazy like goggle setup on, and I'll be tinkering away on some tiny little like watch part.
Yeah.
And she'll be like, "You're insane."
Dude, I thought you were gonna say you got into like the brands of watches, and I'm like, I know I'm not into that, but people are into it. But you were like, I'm into watches now, making the watches.
Yeah, fixing them. Yeah, dude, like I'll order some beat up thing on eBay.
Yeah.
Restore it, fix it up, and then this is cool. Got
That's
a nice
pretty
watch.
awesome, dude.
I'll sell it or something. I'll get another one, and it's a hobby. Guns and shooting, same thing. Like, okay,
you became a gunsmith.
Kind of. I've built a lot of my own stuff.
My brother's like that.
Like amateur, but like I also really got into just like, okay, I'm gonna shoot competitively. I'm gonna.
That's cool, dude.
Just for fun. I'm gonna. Okay, cool. I'm good with pistols. I want to get into long range shooting, so I bought a freaking Remington 700 and went out to the 500-yard range and started learning. And
that's cool, dude.
So anything, I'm like that. And with jiu-jitsu, which has like become like, I mean, I'm 40 this year. I will be doing jiu-jitsu for 21 years.
Half your life.
So it's officially a little more than half.
Yeah,
right.
More.
So for something that's been such a large part of my life, man, like I can't put into words how crazy obsessive and how deep I dive into things when it comes to jiu-jitsu. What
is it that you find so interesting about jiu-jitsu, learning about jiu-jitsu or studying jiu-jitsu, I would say?
Okay, so the thing that drew me to jiu-jitsu, having boxed when I was younger, right? I remember my parents asking me, well, do you want to try something like karate?
Yeah.
Something like that. And all those martial arts, like, I guess those questions were posed to me once I was a teenager, and you're a little more cynical when you're a teen, and you're like, that stuff seems like bullshit. Like out of channeling your chi and stuff like that, right? So like one of the things that drew me to jiu-jitsu as an adult was this stuff works because there's a logic behind it.
Right.
You're using leverage and you're using, gravity, and everything you're gonna learn has like thought and process behind it. And when I started studying jiu-jitsu and seeing, wow, that is in fact the case. There's no bullshit here. Right. There's no like kick this wall 10,000 times and you will have like the world's strongest kick, right? Like there is a logic to this process. Then it became like, okay, I want to get deep into the how and why this works,
right? And
pick this stuff apart. And I want to make like, it's crazy that like the jiu-jitsu community has like golden rules, like the 10 commandments of jiu-jitsu, phrases you hear across the board in jiu-jitsu schools everywhere, that get followed by most people for about 5 seconds.
Okay.
Like jiu-jitsu is all about efficiency.
Right.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So efficiency, I'm trying to make my technique as simple as possible.
Okay.
About 6 months after you start jiu-jitsu, you're doing crazy fucking berimbolos, and you're not. You're
going the opposite way.
Efficiency has gone out the window.
Yeah, real quick.
You come back to it eventually.
Yeah.
But we have like those golden rules. What's a classic one? Position before submission.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's that one here everywhere.
That's a good one that fucking nobody follows. And I mean like nobody.
Okay.
Like so
people would jump to like a heel hook for no reason and not have a position.
Okay, so here's a crazy observation I made.
Okay.
You hear that rule from day one. Position before submission. Okay. Name the first 3 submissions you learned.
Armbar.
Boom. Don't even need the other 2. Okay. When you go for an armbar, when you learn an armbar, where do you typically learn it from? What position?
Mount, I believe.
Yeah, because it's the easiest place to teach somebody armbar mechanics.
Right.
Cool. So you go for an armbar from mount. You sit back into your armbar. Okay. If your opponent knows nothing, which is how jiu-jitsu has been taught for a very long time. For a very long time, jiu-jitsu has been taught as we have a magic secret power and other people don't know our magic secret power, so we just get away with murder.
Right.
That's not the case anymore.
No, not anymore.
So the most common way that somebody defends an armbar is they grab their hands together and then they try to stack you or get on top of you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you don't hit your armbar, what happened to your position?
You lost it.
And yet, a black belt instructor who told you position before submission,
Yeah.
then went and in the first 3 submissions that he taught you said, here's an arm bar. You're going to take this arm. You're going to sit back on it.
That's true, man.
Right?
That's true. Yeah.
That's an observation I made as a black belt many years later. And I was like, okay. And then I created an entire system for my advanced guys.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I have a rule with my purple belts and up. With my purple belts and up, we do not drop back on arm bars.
Okay.
We
you
do not
don't go straight back.
We do not sit. If you are in a top dominant position,
okay,
and you are going to go for an arm bar, my guys are not allowed to sit back on that arm bar. They have to drop forward in on it into a belly down position.
That makes sense. Yeah, because it can't turn into you.
And because if you analyze what variation of the arm bar is the strongest arm bar, it's the belly down.
Belly down, yeah.
Common misconception with the belly down is, well, whose belly is down?
Okay. Can you explain that to me? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah. So, okay, you go into a belly down arm bar. Whose belly is facing the floor?
Wouldn't it be both of ours? No, I mean, the guy attacking.
It's your opponent's.
Really?
Your opponent is belly down while you're on your side.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right?
Okay.
So in every variation of the arm bar, what do you typically have behind your back?
The mat?
The floor.
Right.
So your hip extension is limited to how high I can raise my hips. And then there's interference behind me from the floor.
Right.
But when you do a belly down arm bar, your opponent is belly down and you're on your side. There's nothing behind you. So not only can you get full hip extension, but you can windshield wiper your whole body out.
That makes sense.
So mechanically, it's the most powerful armbar variation that exists.
Yeah.
So instead of dropping back for an armbar and potentially losing position,
right,
we drop in forward into a belly down and then create a situation where for our opponent to get to a stack, he has to roll through an armbar,
right,
possibly further exposing his hand.
Yeah, he has to take the risk.
On the way up to a stack, he potentially exposes his back for us to get to our back take system.
Oh, that's awesome, dude. Yeah, and the way that you said it, like when you compare like whose belly's on the ground, it's your opponent. So you're kind of like sitting on the guy.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't do belly down arm bars correctly because they hear belly down arm bar and then the guy's belly down and they're belly down. And it's really uncomfortable. And they're like in a plank position.
Yeah.
But if you just turn on your side where you're facing the guy's legs.
Right. Yeah.
Now you have that full body extension. You can pledge allegiance on the arm. You can grab their leg to control the roll as they try to roll through. And it's super powerful.
Which is what the person on the bottom is really going to think. When you have somebody locked, well, in my opinion, when you have somebody locked in and you're locked in an armbar, you're kind of waiting for that moment for them to fall back to stack them, you know, or to hitchhike or whatever.
I created this whole crazy armbar system and it started with that thought. Right.
Oh,
and then it just led me down this chain where it was like, okay, so here's another area where people spend a ton of time on. Okay, my opponent is defending his hands. If you go on YouTube, you'll find 60 different videos on approaches to make the guy let go.
Right.
Right. How do I make the guy release his defense so I can go through with my armbar?
Right.
If you just go belly down, the amount of force you are imparting is so much greater than all the other arm bars that just the force of your hips is going to make 85-90% of this holding on like impossible for the guy to do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess especially if you get that angle, like you can't, if they get a little bit more lateral or you turn to that side, you have that angle to break that arm out a lot more. Yeah. Cause you're fighting a pretty strong grip and you're trying to rip it back unless you go like, even if you try to grip the hands out, there's ways to grip it, but that makes sense.
The whole climbing, how do I break, which way do I pull? Do I pull towards the head? Do I pull towards the body?
Right.
These are all questions that you run into when your alignment is the traditional alignment.
And you basically took those questions out by doing the belly down.
Yeah. As the lead in, right? Versus what a lot of people do. Like people will go to belly down arm bars, but the common progression you see is people will drop back on the arm bar. The guy will come up to stack, and then guys are inverting and spinning underneath to get to a belly down.
Right.
We're going the opposite route. We're going the belly down is the
that's what we
one
want.
I want to get to. So when I go for that arm bar, especially if I'm going from a top position, I am not dropping back on the arm. I'm dropping forward on the arm.
Yeah.
And you can also impart braking pressure from the moment your leg crosses over the head.
Right.
So from the moment I cross my leg and I put my leg over the top of the guy's head, I start flexing my hips in, and it's already breaking pressure as I'm falling forward.
Right, because you're not. I guess it would be creating distance between the arm and the body. Like you do a little bit when you fall back. When you're doing forward, you're kind of putting pressure on the arm.
Yeah, and when you fall back, there's also moments of like when you impact, there's like a release,
Right.
and sometimes that creates an opportunity for the guy to free himself if you don't deliberately like slow your drop. You know?
Yeah, like if you try to do it like quick.
Yeah, like if you just go on it fast, which is kind of like the solution a lot of people go to when they start running into a lot of defense, right? Oh man, every time I go for an armbar, these guys get their hands clasped or they get to a rear naked choke grip, so I got to go faster.
Right.
And that's not the answer, because when you go faster, now things get sloppy.
You lose position.
Yeah, you lose weight transfer on your opponent's body, and you know, you create more opportunities for them to like create spaces and escape on your way out.
Yeah, so you're losing the position for the submission. Complete opposite of what you were talking about.
Right. And it's, but again, it's like we have these like golden nuggets that they give us on day one. And then I don't know why we just very quickly like do things that like ignore the golden rules. So one of the things I did during my analysis was I don't care if it's cool. I don't care if it's sexy. I just want it to work.
Right.
Right. So I'm gonna be like a purist and be like, okay, don't give up position before submission. So long before I'll ever go for an armbar, I'll try to 2-on-1 wrist pin to an Americana. I'll try a Kimura. I'll try anything else. And then an armbar is much later in my progression or in the progression of my students than it is versus someone else. Right?
Okay.
We're very big on the back position from everywhere. Right?
It's the best position
because the back is the back is the best position in submission grappling. Right.
Yeah. So
why not get really, really fucking good at getting there from as many places as you possibly can?
It's automatic defense if you get the back. The guy's on automatic defense.
Yeah. So everything for us, at least the way I teach, is my goal is to get to your back, and then it's a process of how close was I able to come to that goal, you know, and then as or if things begin to fall apart on me, then then I kind of branch out to the other less statistically viable options.
Oh, that's a good way of putting it. So you kind of have it like a tree. You have your main options, and then this doesn't work, I'm going to go to the other one, depending on which one is more successful.
My attempt is to get to the highest percentage position possible. And then once I arrive at that spot, whatever that spot is, this is the best possible position that I could attain on this opponent. Now I'm going to start hitting them with the highest percentage submissions in my arsenal.
Right.
And then as things devolve, or go my way or don't go my way, then I branch out into other choices that may be more exotic or that may lead to transitions to somewhere else. And it's all about how you join things together.
Right.
Right. Because a lot of times people will go for maybe one attack and they'll have a backup plan.
Right.
But they won't really have a plan for like, okay, how does this position fall apart and where does it leave me?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Right. 100%.
So again, if the focus is position before submission, then even when I'm going for submissions, I should have a backup plan where if these submissions don't hit, I should be able to loop back into a strong position.
Wow, that's interesting. How did you get to that point though? Like, how did you?
Constant nerdy fucking analysis. Just dude, like watching so much competition. But do you have like an footage.
Excel spreadsheet? I mean, because you said stats.
Dude, man, I mean, I filled notebooks.
Yeah.
With stuff. I've bought every jiu-jitsu book that they ever had at our Barnes and Nobles and went through it. I've watched every video, every instructional. I watch hours and hours and hours of competition footage. Sometimes I just make my students do things. I'm like, listen, get in this position, do this, and just play it out and let me watch you guys.
Do you feel that they learn better that way? When you do that type of exercise? Like comparative to doing the traditional way, which let's just say they're breaking down a technique that week or whatever the case may be. So you give them the liberty to kind of explore a situation.
I think it depends. First off, they're like, people have so many different ways of learning.
Yes.
Right. Some people are visual learners. Some people need to get hands-on. Some people are auditory learners. There also needs to be a certain level of familiarity with the language of jiu-jitsu as a whole. So over the years, the way I've structured it is at my gym, we have 2 set curriculums, right? So I have my set white to blue belt curriculum, which is kind of like your bare bones, most efficient, most universal jiu-jitsu techniques in every possible position, independent of whether it's gi, no gi, self-defense, whatever, right? Like this is a core skill set everyone from white belt to blue belt has to learn, so that we all have the same operational knowledge of like the 8 basic positions of jiu-jitsu, right? So you got to have 3 mount escapes, 3 side control escapes, 3 submit, and then it's always the defense and then the flip side on offense. Okay, here's your core knowledge. Then from blue to purple, I'll layer another core curriculum, right? And if you come to a fundamental or an intermediate curriculum class,
which would be the blue to purple,
the white to blue or the blue to purple class, that is the same class year round. So it will start at the beginning of the curriculum. I will run all the way through it, and then we will backtrack, and it usually takes about a year to go through all of the material, right? But let's say 2023, I went through the entire material. When 2024 rolled around, boom, right back to the start. Right. So that if you ever, even if you're a higher belt and you need a refresher on core positions, you can come take the white to blue belt class, and it's set curriculum. Yeah. The advanced class is way different. Right. Because we'll do things like specific systems, right? Like we have a very specific back attack system, a very specific armbar system, a very specific methodology for passing guard. So we'll cover those things in great technical detail. Yeah. But we'll also do nights where it's, okay, this is positional sparring, right? We're going to work this position. We're going to play this out and just work this. We'll have nights where it's like rolls, right? But rolls with very specific goals. And then we'll have days that feel more like open mat. And some days I'll take 3 months where I'll have a very specific set of goals in mind for, like, I want the students working this, that, and the other. And then after 3 months of that, I'll go, okay, so now for the next 2 weeks, I'm just going to have the advanced class roll for a week. And I'm just going to observe. Right. And I'm going to sit there and I'm going to make observations about where did they concretely get better as a group. Yeah. And where do they still need work. And then that will inform what I'll teach the next 2 or 3 months. That makes sense. Or if I take a batch of guys to competition and they do great in one area, I'm like, okay, this is cool. This is down. Where did they struggle? Okay, this is where we're going to touch base next, right? Because if there's one thing that grapplers are, especially advanced grapplers are really bad at, is looking in the mirror and saying, I need to work on this position because I'm dog shit here. Right. Right. So what tends to happen is guys that are really great at leg locks, just oh man, like they'll evolve these giant chains of leg lock attacks, right? Yeah. But then they'll have a huge hole like in their side control defense. Or something simple, right? Yeah. As soon as you break them out of their meta, now they're lost. You have guys that are, man, like takedown and top position, I'm all about it. And the second they end up on their back, they look like blue belts. Right. Right. My job as your coach is to make you improve everywhere. Right. Right. So once you have a set skill set going, I will, from an individual level to the group level, look and say, okay, where are we statistically weak? Where do we need work? Yeah. And then even if we suffer for a while, right, I have to get everybody on par with these areas have to improve. That's pretty cool, man. Like, and so you would say that the variability of what you teach or the curriculum, so to say, happens a lot in the advanced class. That's a lot of testing, 100%. A lot of testing, yes. A lot of analysis and observation to revamp the technique. Experimenting with my methods of teaching, right? Changing things up. Do we drill something specific? Do we drill in a less specific manner where it's just like, okay, grab somebody, this is your starting position, but you're going to try different body types. You're going to try different scenarios. We're going to see how it plays out. Right. Versus, okay, detailed step by step. You have to go for this to this to that. Yeah. Versus, okay, let's just free ball it. Let's just see how it goes. Right. Right. It depends. Yeah. And I make those calls. I feel like you can be more artful in the advanced area. Yeah, that makes sense. Because they have the fundamentals that you need in order to. Yeah. Because I feel like jiu-jitsu is both like it's very technical, right? Right, like anything is. You even learning how to paint
Right.
You learn the basics of how to paint, of how
Right.
to blend colors. And then as you get better and you practice, what you paint becomes better, becomes more complex.
Right.
So I like to make sure that everybody has the same foundation
Right.
of fundamental knowledge. And then, okay, that's everybody's got the same color palette. Now let's go paint.
Right.
Now, okay, you have a preference for gi and you want to develop as a gi competitor. Cool. Now we can specialize.
Now you
in
can
that,
do it.
You know, oh, you're a police officer and your deal's completely different from the guys who are competing, right? Your ass is on the line. Cool. Now we can step aside and we can focus on what you need specifically for your job.
Right.
But we all operate under the same core knowledge. We're all speaking the same language.
Right. You need you need that capability in order to speak with somebody or to speak in order to train somebody. You need them to have this fundamental knowledge so that the variabilities of what you're teaching doesn't affect what they're doing.
And then when they're in the advanced class, I feel a little better. I feel a little freer as far as like really getting in the weeds. Right?
Okay.
Like it's hard to teach a physics class if everyone in the room can't multiply.
That's a good analogy.
You always have there are always like those sciences, the sciences are cool, but some sciences involve math. Right. And some people like science, but can't do the math. Right. I try to get everybody comfortable with the math.
Yeah.
So that now we can all at least, discuss the theory with some kind of working knowledge together.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's gaining something, even if the technique is extremely complex.
Right. Man, that's how long did it take you to think of teaching that way? Is it something that you started developing from the beginning, or did you how did you get to that point? Because that's pretty in depth.
You figure things out as you go.
Okay.
Some things are easy to figure out fast. You go to enough jiu-jitsu classes, you train around, you travel, you realize, okay, I come to class on Tuesday and the guy is teaching guard passes. I didn't go to class on Wednesday. I came back on Thursday, and when I came back on Thursday, they were on mount attacks.
Yeah.
Right. So how do I connect what I learned Tuesday to what I learned on Thursday? And everything is changing every day, and it seems to be based on what the teacher feels like teaching.
Right.
That's not effective.
No, it's not.
Right. So one of the first things I figured out is you need a curriculum.
Right.
Right. Like I will start my Sunday with a cup of coffee, and then I will sit down and be like, all right, this week we are doing this and this and this in this class. Whether it's a specific set of techniques or a specific set of drills or whatever, that's what we're doing. And that's what we're doing all week.
Okay.
Right. So that if you came into class on Monday, that's what you got. And if you came back to class on Thursday, you got a repeat dose.
Right.
But everybody that came through the gym that week got access to the same material, got access to the repetition of it, and everyone is on the same page.
And do you so you're constantly evaluating so that you know what you're going to go. I'm assuming that because you say we're talking in terms of weeks. Mm-hmm. But I'm assuming that it's a much larger thing that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I generally have a plan for where I'm going, right? Like where I feel the room needs to go.
Yeah.
What I feel the students need to learn, where they need to improve. So I'm thinking not just for the week, but for the month,
right? For
a couple of months ahead. I'm thinking about what competitions are coming up, right?
Okay.
Is it gi season? Is it no gi season? Do I have MMA fighters? So I'm trying to take everything into account a little bit and kind of make sure there's a blend of stuff going on. It's tough, a lot,
dude. That's tough because you're saying gi season, no gi season, and you're bringing a lot of components that may affect the material and what you have to teach. Cops, MMA fighters,
but the other thing too is I have everything nicely divided.
Oh, okay,
right?
okay.
So half of our schedule is gi, half of our schedule is no gi.
Okay,
right. And I know, okay, this week I'm teaching leg locks.
Right.
Well, clearly that's not going to transfer to the gi classes.
Right.
Right. So, okay. So this week I need something specific for the gi and then something different for the no gi.
Right.
Right. Or a lot of times I prefer jiu-jitsu that's more universally applicable.
Yeah.
Right. So you will not see a great deal of complicated grips and lassos and crazy stuff in our gi curriculum.
No, which is good because applicable.
Because I want it to be able to translate to your entire skill set, right? Second, you take somebody out of the gi and it's no gi, there's a big learning curve on how do I control someone when I don't have these grips.
100%.
You need the underlying why things work. And that's kind of where I tend to focus my attention more. So a lot of times it does like, okay, I can tweak my lesson to where it's kind of the same thing in the gi and kind of the same thing in no gi, and we're all on the same plane. But if there is like an area where like, man, this week is like, yeah, it's heel hooks and you can't do those in the gi, then I'll have 2 plans for those.
It's a lot of studying, dude.
It's a lot of studying. It's a lot of thinking ahead, but that's my job. That's why you pay me.
100%.
Right.
It's a lot of studying. It's a lot of, not just that, I'm assuming that you also have to go into like where the sport's going, how competitions are going, and
what the current meta is for the top level athletes and things like that. But that stuff becomes evident with observation, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that was really easy to phase out right away: traditional warm-ups, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're paying somebody to teach you,
is that recent? Sorry to interrupt. Is that something recent that you came up to, or is that something you've been doing forever?
No, I've been doing that for a few years now. You know, like if you're, I used to be a big advocate for it because I was like, man, I gotta push the physical condition of these guys,
which
hard.
is a good thing to think about.
Yeah, but it's a better way to do it is with a hell of a lot of rolling.
Yeah,
right.
True.
Because you're not going to replicate. There's no exercise that you can do that can replicate the intensity of a roll.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
so
true.
if you come to my advanced class is 2 hours long. It's a 1 hour of technique and then 1 full hour of rolling.
1 full hour of rolling.
1 full hour
so
of rolling,
like open mat.
Guaranteed. Yeah. So from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., we're going to do whatever we're going to do technically. And then from 8 to 9 p.m., we're rolling.
The people come out dead.
Yeah. But
that's great.
But that's 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously you don't have to roll every roll.
Right.
But if you want to push yourself to where you're in there every roll,
it's there for
you. Right.
Yeah.
So if that's how you want to push your cardio level, that's how you do it. Right. But
I agree.
But if you're coming in and the first 20 minutes of your class are devoted to jumping jacks,
yeah,
like that time is not being used efficiently.
Right. And there's probably better, more efficient ways to warm up when it comes to training jiu-jitsu, or maybe just, I've always thought this, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't kind of like the drills that you're doing going to warm you up too? Like maybe you can do some stretches so you don't get injured, but like,
yeah, you can build up. Like you can start with a slow drill and then work it into like, okay, we went 20%, we went 40%. Right. 50, 60. Now we're going live. Now there's full resistance. Like that's something I learned from Damian to do a lot.
Oh yeah.
Right. A lot of we do a full body stretch to start the class. That's something I still do.
Yeah.
And then we get right into the weeds of this is the position. These are the areas we're working. And then as we go, it's the same thing, but just the intensity keeps ramping up.
It's more efficient use of times too, man.
You know, that's the main thing, right? Especially with like my advanced class is 2 hours long, but all my other classes are an hour, and that's not a lot of time.
No, it's not.
Right. So you have to use that wisely.
And you're also thinking about the people that are coming in to take those classes. Like not everybody's a competitor, but you want them to get the most out of their class.
Yeah. My job is to teach you jiu-jitsu.
Right.
Right. Like your cardio is only my concern in so much as like, what do you need it for?
Right.
Right. Like, oh, you're here as a hobby. This is your workout. You're going to get a workout.
Right.
Right. You're going to get plenty of a workout. Oh, you're a competitor. Like you're a serious competitor. Okay, dude, you need to invest time in doing your cardio and doing extra. Right. Yeah. Like you want to go lift. That's you want to go get cardio. You want to cut weight. That stuff is not in my time.
Right.
Right. We are all going to sit here in this room right now and use this hour or this 2 hour block to get as good as we can at the technical aspects of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
That's my job. That's what I'm good at. That's what I'm there to do.
And what about the coaching element? Do you have like a structure for your competitors? So I know there's like seasons that, gi season or gi season as you referred to it.
Yeah.
Are there like goals that you have for them to lead up to the trials? Let's say if they're not
depends on how serious the competitor is.
Oh, okay.
You know,
and that's based off their commitment, I'm assuming.
Yeah, like look, like a lot of guys, they don't know that they want to go for a world title or something like that, right? They just want to get out there and compete.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so first thing, you want to compete. It's not a one-time thing.
Okay.
Right? It's because everybody's like, oh, I just want to try it out. It's like, that's not how it works. It's not how it works. Okay, you want to try out your first competition? I'm going to tell you what's going to happen right now.
Right.
You're going to go out there. You're going to get super nervous. You're going to shit your pants. Nothing is going to go the way you think it's going to go because your adrenaline is going to be pumping so hard. You're not going to be able to think.
Right.
You're going to shit the bed and you're going to lose.
Right.
Most likely. That's how it's going to go. Right? If you have a better day than that, congratulations. You've had a better day than most people ever had in their first competition.
Right.
Myself included.
Yeah, me too.
Right. So if you do better than that, good for you. But the first time typically goes that way. The first several times typically go that way.
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
So if you really want to find out what you're capable of in a competitive sense, you have to do it enough that extraneous stuff, like the adrenaline dump and the crowd and the change of environment, doesn't bother you as much. And the only way to get used to that is repetition. It's like, okay, you want to compete? You should compete 5 times.
Right. If you really want to do it, you got to.
By the 5th time, you will have a more definitive idea if competition is really for you or not.
That's a good point, because there's so many layers and filters that really don't let you experience the competition to its capacity because of the nerves.
Yeah. Now with someone else like my black belt Julian.
Yeah.
Who's a very serious competitor.
Right.
Right. But he can't seem to make up his mind about what he wants to do.
Right.
He's like, do I do gi? Do I do no gi? Can I, he will jump in and anything. He is insane. He weighs 135 pounds. And the first White Lion Promotions event, which was an open weight submission only tournament, he's like, I'm in, let's go. And he won it.
That's great.
So yeah, but it's nuts, right? So and then he'll be like, a common thing is he'll go and we'll do an IBJJF gi match, right? We'll do an IBJJF event, and he'll come back and be like, man, that was hard as shit. I was like, yeah, of course it was, because those guys specialized. The guys who are doing gi at black belt are only doing gi.
100%.
They're not then jumping into open weight sub only tournaments and doing no gi and all that stuff, right? You get specialists. You don't see Craig Jones go put on a gi and go do worlds.
Yeah.
Right. So what do you want to do? What do you want to specialize in? So with him, it was stuff like, let's sit down, let's make a goal. And then he was like, okay, I want to go no-gi worlds.
Right.
And everything that we did that year was with the goal of, at the end of the year, that's the tournament where you really want to go do something. And that was the goal.
That makes sense, man, because it's, I think at least nowadays, you have to kind of, when you're at that high level of competition, you kind of have to make a choice if you want to do gi or no gi, if you want to get to the highest level. I think it's hard to do both.
Competitively, people have gotten really good at shortcuts.
Okay.
So people have gotten really good at specialization.
Okay.
Right. So my goal is to win this gold medal, and this is a sport. Right. So what's my rule format going to be? I have to get good at my rule format. If it's points, I got to get good at scoring points. And then they will spend the majority of their time developing specific skill sets to accomplish those specific goals, right?
Yeah.
So specific goals within a specific rule set, looking for a specific outcome. And yeah, that's a way to get good fast at the competitive aspect, right? But that's not a good way to get good at jiu-jitsu as a whole.
Okay.
Or
that makes sense.
At the art of jiu-jitsu, right? Like, that's why you have a lot of guys that are fantastic in the gi, right? That I would be really scared to see get in a street fight.
Yeah.
Right? Because they've never shot a takedown in their life.
Right. They pull guard.
Everything is pull guard and look for my grips.
Right.
It's like, it's a whole different ball of wax when there's a dude standing over you and he's throwing bombs at your face, right? So,
which is what you try to incorporate, I guess, in your beginner classes, is that ability.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So for me, like, yeah, competition and specialization and all that stuff and high level athletes, I do it, I help everyone from MMA fighters to gi guys to no gi guys do their thing and structure how to do it and get into it. But I don't want the gym as a whole, or the people that come into my academy as a whole, to lose track of what the core of jiu-jitsu really is.
Right.
Right. So for me, I always come back to that core language of, you have to understand this is martial art. It serves a specific purpose, which is self-defense first.
Right. And that's great that you put in the front end of what people are learning. You know what I mean? Because the majority of the people that are walking into your gyms aren't going to go by AWCC.
Exactly.
They're going for a reason.
Yeah. Like, the competitors are cool, and the competitors, like for us who are in the weeds and super into jiu-jitsu, like, that's what we focus on, right? But that's not the average jiu-jitsu student. That's not, no. Right? The average jiu-jitsu student it's their hobby, and they're doing it for a workout and for self-defense.
Right. It's a kind of disservice if you go and you kind of just push them towards a certain direction, that the reality of why they started training jiu-jitsu was so that they could probably lose some weight, learn how to take care of themselves.
Right.
So give that to them in the front end. If they want to do whatever they want to do with that jiu-jitsu in the end, it's up to them. But at least you know that your student has what they need.
A core of something that they can take anywhere and feel like I can handle myself.
Do you ever revamp those core elements? Like,
yeah.
Because I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing as like, you remember when you were in school
Mhm.
and like it was the same math book 4 years running, but it was like version 4, version 5. I always do that. So I'm really like, I like to make sure that everything is as like efficient and good as possible.
Right.
So, and also time and experience, right? Like man, it's amazing how even like the simplest technique, like a mount escape, is something you'll learn on day 1, and you can still come back to 20 years later and be like, man, you just tweak this one little thing or do this one little thing different, you know? So I always come back and like try to make everything better. Right. And when it comes to like the fundamentals curriculum, I'm very much in the less is more category.
That makes sense.
Right. So I've been stripping stuff out of there for like a long time. Like, how do I make this even simpler? How do I make it as effective as possible, but as simple as possible?
So it's easier for them to retain too.
Correct.
Especially if you're a day 1 person, and body movements in jiu-jitsu are not normal.
Yeah.
It's not something we do every day. We don't use those muscles in that way. And then coming in and making it simpler.
Correct.
And
there are whole positions that we don't like. There are whole positions that we like. There's an over focus on in jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Right. Like guard.
Okay.
Guard is easily the largest area of study in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Because honestly, the guard position is probably the single defining position of jiu-jitsu compared to other grappling arts. Right. Like, it's the thing that really sets jiu-jitsu apart, is the ability
the development of that guard.
Yeah, the ability to submit your opponent from the bottom position. Right.
Yeah.
But man, like, is that a deep area of study?
Yeah.
Right. And people get really in the weeds. How many different guards can you name?
Dude.
Right. How many different?
Too many.
Yeah. And within each one of those guards, how many different techniques?
Yeah.
So you get this huge volume of work and stuff in guard. And then it's like, well, what about north-south?
Yeah. That's true.
How many techniques do you have there?
Not many.
How about turtle position?
Techniques or escapes?
Escapes, techniques, whatever.
You know, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, how many total techniques, defensive, offensive, do you have there?
Right.
See, so you get a guy that's got, man, I've got 50 techniques on my back. I've got 3 techniques in these areas. Yeah. So okay, so
and that's, sometimes you'll get to those positions and you're just rolling. You know what I mean? You'll get to those positions and you don't even know.
Yeah, it's so foreign. I was like, I'm barely ever.
And then
here.
you try to go back to another one, and you'll be like.
So then, as a coach, what I try to do is cover all those bases as like well as I can, and then exploit some of that. Right. Right. So
exploit that on. Knowing that the community doesn't know.
No, yeah, exactly. Like, okay, so I have a rule for all my guard players. Not even a rule. It's more of a saying. It's like, what's the sign of a good guard?
That you can break the person's posture?
It's a guard you don't see very much of.
How can you explain that?
Sure. If I'm on my back, my guard is so good, I immediately hit you with the technique that gets me on top or submits you.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
So if I'm on my back for an extended period, let's say the match is 6 minutes long, and I'm on my back in guard for 3 minutes, something's wrong.
Okay.
My guard techniques are not hitting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? I'm spending a lot of my time trying to retain guard.
Yeah.
And not let you pass, but I'm not being effective with my guard.
I get what you're saying.
Right?
Yeah.
So if I have a really good guard, you won't see much of it.
That's true.
Because if I end up on my back, I swept you right away and I'm right back on top.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Like if you're on the guard a lot, you're doing a lot of setups, trying to get the sweep, trying to get a submission. But if you have a good guard, it should be entrizado.
So when my guys are on their back, I'm like, do something. Shit or get off the pot.
Okay.
Stop trying to retain the position and let's make something happen. Right?
Okay.
Because sometimes the answer is, yeah, you have to get to the correct technique for the moment.
Right.
And sometimes it's like, dude, just let him get to half and then wrestle up.
Yeah.
But stop wasting your energy in this negative zone where nothing is happening other than you're just trying to retain this position.
Right.
Where, okay, if nothing else happens in the match, you're going to lose.
Right.
Because he's on top and you're on bottom.
Right. Yeah. So like, so you're saying that, so you, the way that you would approach guard is like, I don't want to say a minimalist, not minimalist, but like a more purposeful.
Very purposeful. You have to be very purposeful about what you're doing.
Right.
Right.
It's not like, oh, I'm going to go in here and then I'm going to try to set this up. It's like, no, you got to go in already with the mentality that I have this goal and this is what we're doing.
It should be your goal in all positions.
Right.
And your whole time doing jiu-jitsu, that everything I do, every movement I make, every placement of my hand, this is where I distributed my weight. This is how I put my foot. This is how I turn my head.
Right.
Every one of those things should have a purpose and a goal.
Yeah.
Right. But we spend a lot of time when we're grappling just kind of going with the flow. Because there's a lot of fun in that too.
I was going to say that's fun.
There's a lot of fun in just being lost in a role and enjoying yourself. But sometimes you have to focus in and be like, no, I like the whole goal of this is to be as efficient and deadly as possible, as quickly as possible. Right. So I have to stop doing all this other excess shit just because it feels good.
Right.
And I have
and
to
it looks cool.
I have to get to the fucking point.
Right.
Like if the move is cool, but it takes me, 3 minutes of setup and I barely ever get there, what's the fucking point?
Yeah.
Of putting it in your arsenal, dude. Like, go with something simpler and get good at that. Rep that 1,000,000 times and just be really good at hitting that spot as fast as you can.
Right. So you're like, it's like a lot of people, the way that I'm getting is like a lot of people have good retention, but maybe their guard isn't really a good guard. Just talking about the guard as an example.
Or they're just, so guard as an example, they're just too comfortable.
Right.
They're just, it's very jiu-jitsu culture that it's like, it's fine, I'm playing guard.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, until the dude's punching you in the face.
Right.
Or, or like, okay, it's a match. You have 5 minutes. And if you don't get a sweep or an advantage or something, you're going to lose the ref's decision just because the guy is on top trying to pass.
And those camp there.
Yeah, more often than not. Guys will, I'm on top, I'm fine. He's the one that's got to do something because he's on defense. So you have to like remind yourself that like not every roll is a flow roll. There's a purpose to what we're doing. Yeah. Right. So I have to be effective. I can enjoy this, but I have to eventually I have to dial all this shit in. Right. Right.
And take off the excess, take off the fat.
You have to trim the fat on everything.
Yeah. Especially you want to be effective in jiu-jitsu. I agree 100%. So we're wrapping up now, man. First of all, thank you for staying for your 3 edits.
My pleasure. It's okay.
Is there anything you want to talk about that we didn't talk about? Anything you want to promote that we didn't cover?
No, man. Happy to be here. Just if you guys check me out, Daniel Perez, BJJ _ Miami on Instagram. Come by, train anytime you want. We're very welcoming. Yeah. And you guys can see some of the stuff that I've been talking about.
Yeah, which is really interesting. Wish we had more time. Thank you, man.
Oh, man, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It was great.